I'm recording it. We're going live. I didn't get any water.
So introduce us, if you would mention that I have a channel, and then also, intro. So
we're live, so you should stop talking.
All right. So let's see if this is going to work.
Okay, it says that it's streaming. So this is what I did last time. And I opened it up on
Introduce us, if you would mention that I have a
There we go.
All right, cool.
Just mention that I have a channel. Okay, guys. So as Roy has instructed me to do, my name is Jade. This is Roy. We're Black House Marketing, also the founders of the From Cold to Sold system for real estate agents. If you're here, you probably are a real estate agent or an agency owner. That's a little bit about us. We do this every week. We have videos where we basically give you tips and tricks from what we have learned from working with thousands of real estate agents. So a lot of the data that we get from this comes from us actually collecting live footage from our CRM service so that we can bring you what's working, what's not working, and give you guys helpful tips on what's essentially going to change your real estate business for the better. So
just before you go any further, you can stop sharing your screen because there you can see the YouTube studio. There we go. Okay, we're all set to go. Yep. Thanks, sorry, go ahead. Yep.
So anyways, today the topic that we are going to be talking about with you. Oh, it's a good thing I had to stop sharing my screen because you'd see all my meeting notes ahead of time. So anyways, the main topic that we're going to be talking about is converting your seller leads and our tips and tricks on the best practices to do that. Again, this is all based on information that we have got from our customers. So
before we dive into that, I just want to sort of, basically explain this a little bit as to why we're doing this specific topic. Right now, we deal with realtors, and we have tons of realtors that we work with and come to us looking for help, advice. And right now, if you're in real estate in any way, shape, or form, the market is insane, for lack of a better word. It's basically hasn't been like this since I think the 60s. Interest rates haven't been this low historically in over 4,000 years. If you're living under a rock, you might not have noticed that the houses are selling well above asking. You have to put in tons and tons of offers just to get purchase a house for your buyers. So what everyone's sort of looking for is to have a bit more control over the whole deal process and just have an easier time of it by having listings, by talking to sellers and getting those listings. So it comes up again and again in conversation. It's like, I'm getting the appointments, I have these people to talk to, but what do I say? So we want to do this video specifically to address that. And there's a couple things that, we want to basically present this in such a way so that we, even before we dive into what to do and what not to do, we also want to explain when to use this and when not to use this, because that's pretty important to cover. So just as a little bit of an introduction prior to actually getting into the swing of things.
Thanks, Troy. So the first thing that we should probably touch on is definitions and stipulations, because there's two very important things in this video specifically that we're not actually touching on. So I think it's really important to define, one of the stipulations is that there is a difference between an internet lead and a referral lead. We're talking specifically about internet leads, not referral leads. The main reason why that's important to note is because the way that you sell to somebody from an internet lead versus a referral that somebody that already knows and trusts you, it's going to be a different ballgame. The second thing is that there is a difference between how you are going to approach a seller lead and a buyer lead. Two very important things that I can't stress enough. And we'll probably talk about this in later videos on how to approach a buyer lead. But for now, this is very important. And when there's major differences, I am going to point it out and say this is specific to a seller lead. The difference between a buyer lead, you would basically treat slightly different. So those are really important things to talk about. So let's just dive right into it, Roy. We're going to talk about the opening first, and this is actually one of our main skill sets that we actually have, even outside of, you know, the calls that we look at and audit and coach our customers on. This is the opening, and this is specific to what we do because we actually have a ISA team that actually calls all of the leads. So we've actually studied this. I don't even know what depth we've went to. This is what we study. This is what we do. This is data that we're constantly looking at. So your opening. So do you want to touch a little bit on that, Roy?
Yeah. I can't stress this enough. The opening, as far as your call goes, I mean, there's a lot of things that are really important to your call, but this is probably one of the top two, if not top three, top two. Some might argue it's the most important thing. And I would actually say that it's probably right up there, maybe even the most important thing. Because if your opening's off, then the rest of the call doesn't matter because you're not going to have a rest of the call. Now, when you call somebody, there's a difference there, right? Do they know who you are? Do they not know who you are? You know, is it kind of cold or is it already warm? So if it's a seller lead, the first thing you want to really take into account is, do they know who you are? And if they don't, you're calling them out of the blue. For example, a FSBO, right? You're trying to contact a FSBO to get a listing for sale by owner. They don't know who you are. They don't expect your call. So there it's even more critical because you have even less time to establish their interest, get them hooked in, and to have a continuation of the call as opposed to the call ending prematurely. And if it's a warmer lead, then you also want to reinforce the reason and that it was the right thing for them to put aside time to talk to you early on. And that's in your opening. So the building rapport, you know, matching your prospect's voice, there's a whole lot of things that go into it, and we'll touch on those. But really at the end of the day, if somebody's picking up the phone, they want to know, who is this? What's this about? How long is this going to take? Those are usually like the three things that no matter what call it is, it could even be from your mother or your father. Is this my mom? Is this my dad? Okay, what's this about? How long is this going to take? Pretty much any phone call that you have, those are three things you want to establish really quickly. So the reason for your call has to be a good one. You know, it has to be something that entices them. And you know, who you are is also going to be pretty important, because if you don't address that, it's like, well, I don't even know who I'm talking to. So you could make up for that by having a really good reason, but those are some of the most important things. That's just something I want to touch on before we get into the opening.
So Roy, if I get on the phone with you and right away you answer the phone and I talk to you in this super high inflection, high pitched voice. Hi, Roy, it's Jade calling from Black House Market. What's the first thing that you do if I sound like that?
Sounds like a greasy telemarketer to me.
And what are you going to do right away?
I'm going to be looking for a way to end the call faster, because I don't want to talk to telemarketers. Nobody does.
And we all know that telemarketer voice the second you hear it. I worked in a call center for years selling insurance from a bank. I was that person. You guys all get that call constantly where it's like, I'm trying to sell you accidental death insurance, or just like the most annoying calls that you get. They always sound the same. And it's always that, hey, this is so-and-so. That's your telemarketer voice. I know back in the 90s when people used to actually talk on the phone, we would all make fun of our parents for having this like weird phone voice when strangers would call. That phone voice is what is going to kill your deals, because you come off as a telemarketer and it doesn't sound like this phone call is even supposed to be happening. So if I'm calling someone like Roy, especially because like you listen to his voice, he's very monotone, he's very just like, no offense, but if I hear his voice and that's how he talks, how do you think, if I'm a good person on the phone, how do you think I am going to sound when I talk to him? I'm probably not going to be in your face like this. I'm probably going to lean back and I'm going to match the way that he sounds. And the reason why is because you can build a lot of rapport with someone just by mimicking the way that they sound on the phone. And that right there is going to get you from that barrier of, this person wants to hang up on me right now because I sound annoying and eager and like I'm trying to sell them something, to, is this someone I'm supposed to be talking to right now?
Yeah. In negotiation and in persuasion, the technique and what Jade's referring to with reflecting is called mirroring. So you're literally like somebody's mirror, right? You're their reflection. Now, if it's an in-person negotiation and you want to take it a little bit to an extreme, and you can play around with this, but it can go so far as to, like, if somebody's leaning over their side like this, and then you match them and you also lean over the side like this, that builds rapport, right? There you go. So I'm saying, like, those are all things that build comfort, because you should, oh, this guy's like me, right? If you're leaning back, they're leaning back, and so on and so forth. But on the phone, you don't have the luxury of necessarily doing all that unless it's like a Zoom call. So with phone calls, it's the voice. So Jade mentioned a term that some of you may be familiar with, some of you may not, inflection, voice inflection. There's upward voice inflection, and then there's downward voice inflection. So you can play around with when you use those. Typically, people are going to use an upward voice inflection when they're asking a question. Is that right? Or if it's a command, they're going to say, pick that up. Now, you can actually switch that around and play around with it. And this is we can do a whole video about this. But you can actually do it where, instead of asking your question with an upward voice inflection, you could ask your question with a downward voice inflection. What was your card number? As opposed to, so what was your card number? So there's a lot of ways that you can play around with it, but we want to stick to what you're actually going to be able to use for sellers specifically. So that's what we're going to dive into more. So some of the items that Jade was just mentioning is, for example, you don't want to pick it up as a telemarketer. Jade mentioned I have a monotone voice. That's fairly accurate. Maybe it's not as monotone as it used to be. I've worked on it, but the point is that if I call you with this kind of a voice, I don't sound like a telemarketer. So you want to at least find, okay, so this isn't a telemarketer. I have that out of the way. What's the reason for the call, and who is this? So if I sound like a telemarketer, then who is this? Why are you calling? How long is this going to take? It's almost irrelevant, because already I'm turned off. I want to get off the phone, because clearly you're a telemarketer. Nobody sounds that happy and amped up. It's a friend of mine or family. Nobody ever calls that amped up and doesn't even know my name, if it's a cold call, right? So those are red flags and things that you want to avoid.
Exactly. And to touch on that too, when you're specifically working with sellers, you want to get to the point right away. And this is one of those differences between buyers and sellers. With buyers, you're building rapport in a different way. With sellers, you have to rely on your voice, your inflection, your tonality, your language, your speed, all of that to mirror their personality, because you have to quickly build that rapport. You don't have time to sit there talking about the weather, because the reality is when somebody wants to list their house, how many people do you think are calling them? Especially if they're opting into other campaigns. Say it is a for sale by owner and they already have their house for sale, but they're considering a realtor. How many realtors do you think are contacting them on a regular basis? Or if they've brought up the topic of potentially selling their house, their peers are now saying, hey, you should work with this real estate agent. The competition is fierce, especially right now more than ever. But this is something like, this is timeless. It's always going to be different when you're working with sellers. So why are you calling me and what do you have for me? You have to get to the point, which means you really have to learn how to build rapport without talking about the weather, because those are rookie things. You can do that with buyers. You can talk about the weather all day and someone's going to be like, yeah, I kind of like this guy. It's not like that with sellers. This is cutthroat. So do you have anything else to add on the opening, Roy?
Well, I think we could finish off the opening with like an example of a bad opening and an example of a good opening, because I think that sort of drives the point home. So like, what's an example of a bad opening? I can come up with, for example, like, hey, Jade, I was just calling you because I noticed that you're selling your home. So I just wanted to find out, is it something that maybe we can do together, where I do a listing for you and, I'm your real estate agent. Does that sound like a good idea to you? You're going to have a hard time converting people, calling up that way. And it's like, okay, you kind of said who you are, what this is about. You sound annoying as balls. It's you don't have a lot going for you. But if you want to do the flip side of that, Jay, do you want me to give an example of that, or do you want to try the flip side of that, like something that's a better opening?
You give the example because you're really good at it with your monotone voice.
Yeah. So so you don't have to do the monotone voice part, but the an opening would be like, for example, Jade.
Yeah.
Hey Jade, it's Roy. Is your home is it still for sale? Like
Um,
officially?
it's not for sale yet, but it's something that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, well, I'm a realtor here in the Napa Valley area, and we do a lot of listings. I noticed your home, and I kind of wanted to understand a little bit more. So, do you have a couple seconds just so I can understand what you're looking for, and then see if this is maybe a fit for both of us, and talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm just at work right now.
Right. And from there, that's another thing. But you see, like, I'm not, you can counter the I work thing as a way. But the thing is, it's like, I don't sound like a telemarketer. I've stated who I am, why I'm calling somewhat, and then how long this is going to take. So it's a pretty short call. I've already laid the ground that it is a short call. She's telling me that it's at work with that. And, basically there's workarounds to get around that particular objection, but it's not a very difficult one to get around. So
Exactly.
that's the opening. Jay, do you want to add to that?
No, I think the only thing that's important to note is like pretty much 9 times out of 10, you're going to get that resistance. So just anticipate that you're going to get resistance. You're not going to walk right through every single time. In fact, 9 times out of 10, you're not walking through. And that's why you
Yeah.
have to come off as though, first of all, you're not a telemarketer. They're not hanging up on you. And just anticipate that type of stuff is going to come up.
I
It's
would
part of
suggest that if you're new or even if you're established, it would be a really good idea, especially if you want your other agents to be doing calls like you and you have a good way to go around your resistances, then what you want to do is establish what happens in the calls. Like if somebody says something repeatedly, every time you do a call, they say the same sort of things like, well, I'm at work right now, or can you give me a call back? You need to figure out what's the good way to answer that, because that's a common objection. So you need to write all of those down and then be prepared with each and every one of those. Every time, boom, 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 I can get through those and continue with the call. So that is preparation, super, super important.
Exactly. And maybe we'll do a live on resistance handling as well, just because that is something that we come across a lot. So
If you guys
make
want
sure to
us to do,
subscribe.
yeah, if you guys want us to do one of those, leave a comment below, or a comment for wherever you're watching this in Facebook. Let us know what you guys want to see. If you want to see, specifically objection handling, then if we see a couple comments about that, then, maybe we'll do one. But yeah, make sure you leave comments below.
Cool. So let's jump into the next point. So who's qualifying who? Now, I see this done wrong so many times. And the main reason why is that for some reason, in every other sales scenario in the world, typically when someone is selling, the other person is doing the qualifying. Whereas in real estate, it's kind of flipped. Now, one of the problems that this leads a lot of real estate agents to is that they get on the phone and the first thing they want to start doing is qualifying that person. They're not thinking about rapport. They're not thinking about building a relationship. They're basically forgetting everything that has to do with sales, and they're trying to qualify that person and basically push them away right away. And this is what's going to kill a lot of your sales calls, simply because, like, how are you going to build a relationship with someone when the first 20 seconds of you talking to them is you putting them through 21 questions? It doesn't feel good. It feels like an interrogation. Who are you? Why are you calling? And why are you suddenly asking me these questions?
Yeah.
So one thing that we highly recommend, because you as the real estate agent, you're supposed to be the person building the relationship, and you're supposed to be the person that's building authority. And so it really doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're an agency owner, whoever you are, your job as the authority should never be the person that's actually doing the qualifying. And this is why using an ISA or an assistant or using automations to get through those qualifying questions is going to be paramount to basically segueing you to be that authority, you to be the person who's going to be building the dream, you to actually be that salesperson. Because if all you're doing is qualifying, I can tell you right now, no one is going to build a relationship with someone that's just feels like it's an interrogation right off the bat.
Yeah. If you want to talk about close rates, think about it this way. Are you going to have a higher close rate if you're already talking to somebody that you know is qualified? Or are you going to have a higher close rate if you have to figure out who's who and who's qualified, who's a looky-loo, and who's the tire kicker? You want to have that figured out prior to your phone calls. And that's massively important, because if you look at this on a at scale basis, If you're doing a lot of volume, or if you have a team that's doing a lot of volume, and especially if you're doing paid advertising, it's absolutely paramount that you have people that you get on the phone with and you spend time with that you already know are a fit. Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels and it's a massive waste of time. And it's one of the most frustrating things with companies that just offer lead generation, or for people that try to run Facebook ads, for example, or any kind of other paid advertising. You might get leads, but do you know anything about them? Were they at all honest in any of the information that they filled out? What do you actually know about the person that you're getting on the phone with and that you're about to commit time to?
Exactly. And this is, sorry, I interrupted you because the internet lagged.
Sorry.
This is one of those key points too, with like buyers versus sellers. People who have gotten good at lead generation with buyers have just gotten into these habits that right away, that's what they want to start doing, is they want to start qualifying. And that's why this topic of who's qualifying who, the reality is when you're listing someone's house, the stakes are obviously way higher. And this is one of those key differences. They're qualifying you, you're not qualifying them. Do they have a house? Are they selling it? Okay, what is that going to segue to? Why at that point in time do a lot of people feel like they need to continuously qualify someone? When the reality is you need to be getting that listing. This is why the difference between getting a buyer and getting a seller are two completely different skill sets. Because at this point in time, they're qualifying you, is not the other way around. And if you can't figure that part out and you can't figure out how to actually take from what you've been doing with your buyers to transition it to sellers where you're an actual salesperson and not just someone who's building a relationship and making friends and building their network. This is different. This is a cutthroat thing. You have to be thinking about it different. They're qualifying you.
Any listing that you get or any seller that you end up doing, getting a listing with is actually two sales. And the first sale is your call with them to convince them to let you list their house with you and your brokerage. That's the first sale. The second sale is actually selling the house for them as a listing. So just always remember that it's not just a listing and then you sell the house. You have to also sell them on the idea of letting you sell their house, because they probably are getting other phone calls from other people. So, okay, I get it. You're looking to offer, you're offering to sell my home, but why are you any different than other 3 guys, 4 guys, depending on what market you're in, 5, 6, 10 guys that have called me and really want to sell my house? Why should I work with you? That might be something they're thinking about.
Exactly. Which kind of segues to our next point, unless you have anything to touch on with that.
No, for sure. Let's jump to it.
Well, so your number one goal with your first call, this is important too, because again, when people are overqualifying, they're so focused on figuring out if that person is qualified to work with them. They're not focused on what should actually be happening next and what your primary objective should be on your very first call. And your primary objective on your very first call isn't what a lot of people think. What it is you actually want to take that person to an in-person meeting. Because the second you have that first call with someone, they're going to start to show a little bit of resistance. They're going to start to object. They're going to start to, just be a human being. And what can happen is if this is the very first call and you're not in front of them, you can't read their body language. They can't read yours. Your window to try and build rapport and build that like, know, and trust factor with them, very small. So what you really want to do is your primary objective is that you have to get that person from point A, which is this phone call right now, to I need to get an in-person meeting with you because I need to get in front of you. And this is something that's overlooked so often, that people think they need to be selling on that first call right away. No, you're selling your very first in-person appointment with them. That's it. Take the pressure off yourself and relax. Although on sort of the other side of that is, if you don't get that in-person meeting, what happens next?
Yeah. The thing is that in your first call, you're already selling the idea of them working with you and letting you list their house. But we're talking about homes, $100,000, $1 million plus if you're in California or those kinds of markets. You're talking about a very high ticket item. And high ticket items usually are, if not always, they're going to be longer sales cycles. So part of that is to build trust. And the way you want to do that is, okay, once you've established that, you know what, I do want to talk to you and hear what you have to say. So I'm up for meeting in person. Then when I meet you in person, that's that sizing up that Jade mentioned earlier. That's really when it comes into play, because you can only really feel out, how comfortable you feel about somebody on the phone to a certain degree. Zoom helps with that. So maybe if COVID is an issue in your area still or something like that, then at least the next thing would be
on YouTube.
What's that?
You can't say that word on YouTube.
What's that?
Don't say the C word on YouTube.
The C word?
Yeah, he's like, what word did I say? The COV.
Oh, okay. So, right. Okay, fine. But anyway, that's what I was going to say is that as far as the whole thing with what's going on, the idea is that if you want to use Zoom, you can as a workaround, but really to build rapport to the next level and to really get them to feel comfortable, that could be that first meeting, but you want to definitely work your way towards that as your number one objective. And then, so if you can get to that, then your likelihood of closing them and getting the listing just goes up dramatically.
Exactly. That's a huge thing. And a lot of times what you need to do is leave your ego at the door and just kind of like, you're going to get the weirdest objections on your first call. And that's just really, again, like I mentioned, it's human nature. We right away, we always are on the defense, always. So what's going to happen is they're going to start to object. They're going to show some resistance. And really what they're doing is they're just trying to figure out like, how well are you going to sell them on it? That's why a lot of the objections that you get on that very first call, leave your ego behind. Don't get defensive. Don't go, oh, I'm not going to do that. Just walk right past those objections. Just that they don't even matter at this point in time. The point is figure out what some of their objections are and say, you know what, that's great. Let's talk about that when we sit down and chat about this. If you all of a sudden get into this ego battle where they're giving you this resistance and you're trying to prove something to them, and this is the first 5-minute conversation that you've had with them, you're going to run into issues. And so you really need to be leaving this phone call with a positive impact and them feeling good about you. If all of a sudden you guys are butting heads right at the very beginning and you have your ego up in arms, they have their ego up in arms, what good is that going to do?
I mean, people tend to do business with people that they like. That's really kind of what it boils down to in that sense. So if you hit it off in the call and then you reinforce that with an in-person meeting, everything's going smoothly. You get along with the seller, they get along with you, they trust you, you've built up that trust, that certainty that they have in your abilities, because you've already, if you can close them on doing a listing and getting the listing, then, well, you should be able to close a buyer and be able to get that house sold. So it's obviously a critical step in them having the confidence in allowing you to do the selling process for their home.
Exactly. So on to our next point, follow up and closing the loop. So you always have to have a next step. There always needs to be the next thing that is going to come from this. From your first call, your goal, primary objective, get that in-person meeting. That next step is that in-person meeting. So then what happens after that? You never want to leave your customer going, okay, well, what do we do next? You don't even want your customer to be asking, okay, well, what are the next steps? Obviously, if you're in a sales situation, it's always good when they do ask that, but you don't want them wondering. You don't want them all of a sudden sending you an email being like, hey, like, I'm not really sure where we go from here type of thing. So with that in mind, follow-up is super critical, because one of the number one complaints that we've gotten from prospects about our customers is that our customers didn't follow up with them. The reality is they had a conversation with them and then the loop was never closed. There was never a next step. They were just kind of like, okay, maybe they sent them off to someone, or maybe they requested some paperwork, or maybe they did this, but they didn't actually close the loop. Leaving something open-ended with your customer to do the work, that's not how you're going to sell things. And that's really not ideal in any situation where you have now given them that power. So maybe there is some paperwork you need from them. Maybe there is something that you need to collect from them. That's great. Schedule another follow-up call. Hey, you know what? I need to grab this from you. Once you get that done, let's schedule a meeting. Do you think you could have that done by next Thursday? Okay, cool. Let's set up just a quick 15-minute debrief. We'll just have a quick call. We'll chat again, make sure that we're in the know with each other. I have 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock available. Which time works better for you? Always scheduling and having that next step lets your customer know that that loop is always closed. And sometimes it's redundant. Sometimes just having that meeting where it's like you're just catching up and making sure that everyone's kind of on the same page with everything. Sometimes it feels weird. It's like, well, we don't, like, there's nothing that we actually have to discuss. But a lot of times your customer is going to have unanswered questions in between that time, and they're not really sure like what they're supposed to be doing. So always having that feedback loop is super critical. And again, with that whole follow-up, it doesn't matter what stage someone is at, whether it's maybe for some reason you scheduled an in-person meeting, they had to reschedule. Is that lead dead? Or what do you do now? You follow up with them. Or let's say you had an appointment and you weren't even able to talk to that person and they just no-showed you. Life happens. People who get offended over no-shows and people who think that, oh, that's so insulting, they wasted my time. Those people don't understand that this type of stuff happens in business all the time. And the people who actually do well are the people who look past all of that and go, something probably came up. Maybe they forgot. Who cares? Follow up with that person. If they're qualified and they have a house to sell, are you going to let your ego be so butthurt over them no-showing you that you're not going to try and get that sale? Are you in this for business or are you in this for your feelings? Because you really need to differentiate those two things.
I mean, there's a number of really gold nuggets. I mean, really, super valuable nuggets that Jay just dropped there. And I hope you guys are taking notes on this, because this is really just to help you and be able to drive this home for you to be able to get conversions, whether you're a client with us or not. And I should also clarify, in case this is the first time you're watching a video with us, which I think most of you already know who we are, but just in case you don't, we're a marketing company that specializes in digital marketing. We work on a number of different platforms, but we deliver qualified appointments to our clients, realtors, brokerage owners, teams across the United States and also Canada. That basically, that's going to be for buyers, sellers, different types of campaigns, different ways that we do that. But we've been doing that at a very large scale for a while now. So that's why we're telling you all this stuff. This is stuff that we've seen with our clients. So regardless of if we work together or not, there's definitely information that we can tell you in this conversation and others that will follow that you definitely want to use, because you don't have to make your mistakes and learn from your mistakes. You can listen to us and learn from mistakes that we've seen our clients make. Even mistakes maybe that we've made early on when we started doing this way back in the day. We've been doing this for quite a while, but there's a lot of lessons that you can learn, and you don't have to make those mistakes to learn those lessons. So if you're taking notes, then you can avoid those mistakes and get better conversions, better results. One of the things that really you kind of want to look at is, do you have an urgency? Does the client have an urgency? What's the reason that they need to sell this listing? How soon? What kind of a timeline are they looking at? If they're telling you right on the phone that, well, this is going to be something that I'm going to be looking to sell, I'm just doing some shopping around, this is in 6 months' time, is that dead? No, it just means that it's something that you can add to your pipeline, where in 6 months, you're not going to get one listing, but you'll get multiple because you had this one come back up in 6 months' time. So you definitely want to fill up your pipeline and reinforce your pipeline. So it's something that you're going to need to decide, how much of a drive is it? How serious is this person? Can you get them under contract? It depends on your local laws as well. But the idea is that you want to solidify your pipeline. You want to build that out. And that's how you end up getting consistency, by constantly stacking your pipeline full of people that you've spoken to, that are going to do business with you, that you're going to get listings from. And that's how you end up getting those multiple listings per month, or increasing your multiple listings to an even higher number. Another thing is that, if you have urgency is super important just generally to close sales. If there's urgency, then it's more likely that you'll close. If there is no urgency, then you want to go into follow-up territory. And if there is urgency, then you need to push harder to get that closed. Maybe use scarcity as a tool to be able to enforce that urgency in such a way that you can then convert that and bring all of your work to a fruitful result. But it's, so if you want to combine urgency and scarcity, then that's a really powerful combo. And then if it's not urgent right this second, you have to have a very clear and effective protocol for your follow-ups.
Exactly. And realistically, that really just takes you right down to your listing presentation, which I'm not going to go too much into detail because that's not really the intent of this call. The intent of this call is really just to get you to that in-person meeting. But when you do get to that listing presentation and you do get your first meeting with someone, one of the biggest differences between sellers and buyers is how you're going to be presenting information. When you're working with a seller, keep the fluffy stuff, the stuff that's just qualitative, nice to know information. Don't use that information. Your listing presentation should never be a light and fluffy thing. It should be data-driven, quantitative information. If you have little value add things that you do, say for example, you stage houses, or say you get drone shots of houses, or say you have these little value adds, don't just tell them about it. Tell them why that's important and what type of a difference that actually makes. Because at the end of the day, the majority of realtors go into their listing presentations and they have all of this light, fluffy information that's just roses and, what's the term? Roses and daisies? Roses and daisies when they get to it. And it's like
daffodils, if you're a
daffodils. And like that flowery language and finessing things, like that's great for buyers. The reason why, a buyer's not paying you anyways. When you're working with a seller, they're paying you. They're paying you a lot of money and you're responsible for a very important transaction in their life, because a lot of times, if they're selling their house, chances are they're probably buying another house. And if they're buying another house, they probably have to get that house sold in order for them to not lose money on their current house, or not their current house, the house that they're trying to get. This isn't just a light and fluffy thing. They want to know the numbers. And a lot of times what that really comes down to is, if you don't have your numbers, you're not generating any type of leads, you're not doing any type of advertising, you're not doing anything like that, chances are you don't have a lot of numbers. You don't know your close rate. You don't know a lot about your actual business. And that's why advertising is so important. If you're listing someone's house, chances are they want to know that you run ads. They want to know that you actually advertise things and not just throw something on the MLS and go, got the listing, see you guys later. Just get some buyers in here and we'll sell it. No, they don't want to know that. They don't want you to be doing that. They want you to actually be actively selling their house.
What you want to kind of think about is that when you, on one hand, when you're talking about converting an internet seller lead, converting an internet seller lead is you know, the whole concept is really, it's really important that you have a couple items that you're focusing on. One is momentum. Because this is off the internet, things happen quickly, and chances are if they're on the internet and you know they're maybe talking to your competitors, so you need to have momentum. You need to move forward and with intent and get things locked down. So the other item specifically for converting an internet seller lead is that you want to stack the value. Okay, so you want to come in strong with the value. What's in it for me is really a question that if you're selling something, you need to be able to answer that question. What's in it for me? Why should I be doing this? Why should I be doing it with you? Right? So the value stacking is, okay, well, how are you any different than anybody else? What makes you unique? And how you value stack is going to have a huge role in that. So as an example, well, are you just going to put this up on the MLS and that's it? And then just I have to pay you? Like, what is it that you're doing that's special? Why are you worth dealing with? And why are you going to get this house sold? Maybe not even just for asking price, but more than that. And what can you present in your show and tell, in your pitch or your deck, that's going to reinforce the idea that you're different, that you're better, and you are the only real solution. Because ultimately, if you can answer that, why are you the only one that I realistically should be working with? And why is everyone else irrelevant? If you can answer that, you got listings all day long. And if, for example, you're doing paid ads and you're a master at paid ads, or you have a company like ours that you're partnered with that's doing that for you, and you can get homes sold super fast above asking, and you can do that, you know, day in, day out. You have a whole system, you have a whole team behind you. If you can say things like that, guess what? You think the other guys got something like that? What are they going to say? I have experience. Well, a lot of people have experience, but how many deals are they closing on a regular basis? How many deals are you closing on a regular basis?
Exactly.
Right?
And to add to that, like one of the most common things that we hear is like someone in their listing presentation is, oh, I know this area really well. You know the area well. What does that mean? Like from an actual quantitative standpoint, what does saying you know the area well even mean? It doesn't mean anything. At the end of the day, if you have a pipeline bursting with buyers, you've sold X number of houses last year on X number of time in realistically anything that's going to be telling you or telling your buyer how fast you're able to do it and over market value, all of those numbers, those are things that are going to be so important because that's what they ultimately care about. They don't care, oh, I know the area well. No. Figure out your numbers. Figure out how fast you're doing things. Figure out how above market value you're selling things for. How long are your houses on the market? All of those things, those are going to be things that are going to be contributing to how successful you're going to be when you get their listing. And then obviously if you get the listing, make sure that you actually do that. Those are important things. So
just before we get to, really the juicy part of this and really bring this home, so we bring the most important parts of this together, I just remember that we have this kind of content coming out on a regular basis, and you viewing these, sharing these with people that would benefit from seeing this, leaving comments, leaving a like for the YouTube algorithm. Those are all really important, and we really appreciate that. So actually, if you want to take a second, we'll wait. You can go ahead and click that like button. And if you haven't already subscribed, then go ahead and subscribe. And if you have, you right there are awesome. So keep that up. And if you haven't already subscribed, you got a lot more value coming. It's there and we're happy to do it. So leave a comment, leave a like, let us know how we're doing. And if there's something you want to see in future videos, then by all means, let us know. So with that, let's dive into the top tips and a little bit of a summary.
So this is really just going to be a summary. So if you're someone who basically just fast forwarded through everything, stop fast forwarding right now, because this is where we're just going to summarize everything. So I'm going to go through this really quick. Otherwise, Roy and I both like to hear ourselves talk. We'll ramble. Okay. First point, remember that sellers and buyers are unique and you will not approach a seller the same way that you will a buyer. With buyers, you focus more on like and know. With sellers, you focus more on know and trust. Again, in data we trust. That's why it becomes more important. Internet leads are not referral leads, and understanding this and not using it as an excuse is going to change your trajectory. I'm going to add a little note here. A lot of people have an expectation that their internet leads are going to convert and act the same way as their referral leads. Not the same. Remember, like, know, and trust. If somebody already knows you, if someone already likes you, if someone already trusts you, guess what? It is very easy for you to do business with that person. These are strangers. You're starting from ground zero. Next, qualifying is not your primary objective when you're dealing with sellers. Getting an in-person meeting is. Leave your ego at the door. If someone has objections, or don't get all up in arms. We see people all the time where someone will get on the line and the first thing that they're going to say is, I'm only paying you 1%. And we see some agents that are going, I'm not going to deal with this person. I'm not going to talk to them. And then we have other agents that are like, oh, you know what? We'll talk about that. Let's chat about this in person. We'll figure this out. And they end up getting a 5+% on that. All because they just looked at that objection and went, just go away with that. Next thing, always have a next step and follow up until they tell you not to. There's no point in letting a lead die until someone has actually said to you, you know what? Stop following up with me. And I can honestly tell you, that is so rare that happens. More people are going to complain that you didn't follow up enough than people that are going to say you followed up too much. And so many people get scared. What?
No, I was just going to say on that point, usually in sales generally, 2 follow-ups is usually like the upper limit. And the reality is that if you look at follow-ups, your sale is usually going to happen at the 5th to the 12th touch point. 5 to 12 follow-up touch points. And most people are only doing 2. So if you come in guns blazing, you're taking these internet seller leads that you're creating or that you have a company creating for you, and you're touching up with them, not 2, but 3, 4, 5 times more than that, well, guess who's getting those listings?
And that's why it's important to have those follow-ups regularly, because those touch points are actually helping build rapport. Again, like know and trust factor, you're also getting yourself into that exposure realm. And this is a sales 101, marketing 101. The more exposures you get, the more likely someone is to do business with you. It's basic science, and you can't argue with science. Which brings us to our next point.
Before you get to that, I just want to touch on one thing. Think about it this way. If you're approaching your follow-ups with such veracity that it becomes noticeable to your seller that clearly you're persistent, well, what do you think they're going to suppose you're going to do with their listing? You're probably going to be persistent with every buyer that comes along to try to extract the maximum value. If you're persistent with them, you're probably persistent with everyone. Whereas If you give up after 2 calls, well, that's probably what it's going to be like with my buyers.
And man, if our sales staff only followed up with their leads twice, they wouldn't work for us anymore. Exactly. They'd be out. Anyways, next one, record your calls, listen to your calls, and study your calls. Focus 80% of your energy on being a sales practitioner. Now, a lot of things that we see with real estate agents, because we see their behavior, they focus all of their energy on being a marketer and not being a salesperson. So they waste all of this time going to these networking events. And I'm not saying like these are bad things to be doing, but this is what happens. They're constantly posting useless facts to social media, sharing the same picture every single real estate agent is doing. They're going to all of these networking events. They're doing all of these things to be a marketer. In reality, outsource your marketing and administrative tasks. Delegate, automate, and delete tasks that you don't need to be doing. You can sell houses like wildfire by literally using the internet, focusing on sales, filling your pipeline, and selling to those people. If you're spending an hour a day or 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day on social media, and you're sitting there posting these pictures and sharing and doing all that, and maybe you get 1 lead every 6 months out of that, think of how that time could have been spent if you were automating your prospecting and spending that time on actually becoming the best salesperson that you could possibly be. Those are things that are going to make a huge difference. So again, I think that I kind of touched on this, but outsource your marketing. There's a million people out there that can run ad campaigns for you. We happen to be those people. We can run ad campaigns so that when you're sleeping, your pipeline's getting filled up with leads of people who are potentially looking to sell their house. We can do that for you so that you're not wasting your time marketing yourself. Instead, you're focused on selling. Same thing with administrative tasks. If you have a whole bunch of admin tasks that are basically bogging you down, you need to be automating and delegating those. Get those off of your plate. The ones that you don't have to be doing. That's why it's an 80-20 thing. Spend 80% of your time selling, spend the other 20% doing things that no matter what you have to do. It's just part of the job.
And that 80-20 is a super important principle, because basically like 20% of all the things that you do actually create the majority of movement for your money needle. And you need to figure out what those things are. And it's not going to be actually doing the marketing, which is why so many of our clients prefer that we do the marketing for them, so they can focus on that 20% that actually does move the money needle, and instead outsource to a company that does things the way we do them, which is different than most companies. And that's one of the reasons that we've blown up in size over the last 1.5 years or so. It's just been insanely good. And a bit of shameless plug there, but the thing is that
right there.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, think about it this way. If you get on a call with us, right, you're thinking the whole time kind of like a seller. It's like, well, what's in this for me? Why is this different than any other lead generation company? What do you think your sellers are thinking? Well, how is this going to be any different than any other realtor? I might as well just pick the one that I like the most, which is, again, that goes back to that rapport building thing before. But you got to basically think like, okay, if you're going to be just like everybody else, then what are the things that you're going to be able to do better at? Well, you could be faster. You could have more veracity, more persistence. But if you don't have anything unique to offer, then you really need to have that follow-up game be super strong. So it's the same for us as a marketing company. When people get on the phone with us, how are we any different than any other lead generation company they've worked with, or that maybe that they've tried in the past and hasn't worked out? How come we still get all those people that all have all that skepticism and then end up becoming clients with us and not some other lead generation company? How the hell does that happen?
Don't swear on YouTube. But that's true. Like, and that's why I always stress so much. It doesn't matter what you're selling. You could be selling alarm systems. You could be selling real estate. You could be selling fruit on the side of the road. The fundamentals are all the same. Once you know how to sell one thing, you know how to sell everything. Sales and marketing go hand in hand. I don't know why you're rolling your eyes at that, Roy.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other. Okay, we said we'd try to do this in under an hour. I think we're still under an hour, but yeah, if you guys found this helpful, let's see those likes. Let's hear those comments. If you think this absolutely bombed and there was no value in this, I would be very surprised, but I definitely want to see that comment and understand why you think that. But otherwise, yeah, let us know if it's good, if it sucks. We want to hear your feedback. And if you want to see more of this, you know, if you're listening to this while you're making yourself some coffee, starting off the day, finishing up the day in the evening, whatever, driving home, you know, leave us a like so that other people know this is content that's usable and valuable for them. We look forward to seeing you in the next video, and thanks for watching this. If you've been watching the whole video, you are awesome, and I hope that you learned a lot here and you're able to use it.
See you guys next week. Same time, same place. I'll be in my living room.